All right, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rabbi Abba Perelmuter, and this is Torah Study with Rabbi P. Here we are at the JCC in beautiful Long Beach, California, and I want to give a shout out to my dear friends who are here. Come on, say hello. There you go. Okay. All right. We met last week, and we talked about, this situation with the Jacobson family. And, Jacob and Esau, they weren't getting along that well. Jacob took the blessings. Esau was very angry at him, promised he's going to kill him. So Jacob's mother says to him, you know what, I have a good idea for you. Why don't you go and, go visit my brother Laban, and you'll stay there for a little while, and then your brother's anger will calm down, and then we'll have a reconciliation of the family. And Jacob does that. His father blesses him before he goes, so he travels, and that's where we left it off. Now the good news is he makes it all the way to Haran, to his father-in-law's house, and of course, just like where his mother was met at a well, he figures it must be a good place in those days. We didn't have yet all these places, bars or other place where you could meet beautiful single women. So I guess the well was where you went. So he went to the well. And at the well, they have a conversation with the shepherds about his uncle Laban. Yeah, and the next thing you know, he sees this beautiful girl coming forward, and she has some sheep, and he says, "No, who's that?" And says, "That's Rachel, Laban's daughter." He's smitten. He's smitten with her beauty. He falls in love with her right there and there. No problem, right there and then. He feeds the cattle. And then he says to her, who are you, blah, 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 etc., etc. Laban hears that he's in town. He runs there. He embraces him. Make a long story short, he wants to marry Rachel. Okay. So he says, so what are you going to do to marry Rachel? He says, I'll work. So he worked hard, for 7 years. And then the night came where he was supposed to marry Rachel. His father-in-law pulled a fast one and gave him Leah, the sister. And he wakes up in the morning, he says, wah. What's going on over here? I did this for Rachel. He says, come on, you don't marry a younger sister before an older sister. I'm sorry, we don't do this in this place. So what am I going to have to do to marry Rachel? In those days, you could marry sisters. Later, the Torah forbids it. But in those days, you could marry sisters. So he says, another 7 years. So 14 years he worked for both of these wives. And he worked diligently, tending the flock. And then his wife Leah had a bunch of kids, 6 sons and a daughter. But Rachel had a tough time getting pregnant. But finally she got pregnant, and she had a son Joseph. And after Joseph was born, Jacob decided, you know what? He added another couple of wives, by the way, Bilhah and Zilpah. And anyways, he ended up getting, at that point in the story, he has 11 sons and 1 daughter. Okay? 11 sons and 1 daughter. And then once Joseph is born, he decides, what we're going to do? We are going to go, and we are going to go back home. Now he misses his mom. He's been away for 20 years, because 6 years after the 14 years, he works building up his own business. So 14 years he works there, 6 years he works building up his own business, and you can read all the details in the Torah of what he does for the flock, and now he's ready to go home. But he has a problem. What's the problem? His brother. Because to get from point A to point B, he has to pass by his brother, and the last that we've seen is, in the last episode, what happened? What was Esau's last words to us? I'm going to kill him. All right? So Jacob is afraid, and that's where we're going to pick up the story today. All right? So Jacob is going to prepare for his encounter with Esau. And I know that we read this last week, in the Torah. So I'm just going to go through the first part quickly. And what happens is he prepares 3 things. He prepares a present for Esau, a flock, of animals, of goats and sheep and camel that he's going to send Esau to appease him. Number 2, he's going to pray to God that he protects him. And number 3, if nothing else works, he's going to prepare for war. Now, how is he going to prepare for war? He's not a warrior. He's a peaceful guy. So he says that what he's going to do is he's going to split his cap in 2, and then whoever is with him, he's going to help him have to fight Esau, because he sends a delegation to Esau to kind of test out the waters, to see how Esav is feeling. And the messengers come back and said, Esav is coming towards you, and he has 400 men with him. Okay, so that's kind of a message where he's not coming to wish him a happy birthday. Let's put it that way, right? If he has 400 men that he's coming towards him, it's not good news. So Yaakov prepares. But here's the interesting story. One of the most curious episodes in the Torah, which is filled by curious episodes. I mean, if you read the Torah, it's one curious thing after another, but this is more curious than most. Okay? So what happens here? So now if you want to follow along in the text, this is what we're going to do. So now Yaakov splits his family in two. Takes his wife, his daughter, his sons and his daughter, and brings them over the river, and he's going to leave them there. Okay? And then he's going to see what happens when Esav shows up. So if you want to follow along with me in the text itself, you might go to page 175.
Can you tell me the chapter?
Chapter number 32, verse number 25. Okay? Chapter 32, verse number 25. This is what happens. So, remember what he did in the two previous verses. He got up at night, he took his 2 wives, maidens, 11 sons, and crossed the ford of Yabok. And then when he took them down, he crossed over the stream, and he sent over his possessions. So everybody's on one side of the river, and then he goes back over the river, and the Torah tells us something like this. Jacob was left alone. Now he's alone because he had sent everybody across there, and a man wrestled with him until the break of dawn. What? And he was left alone, but Andre the Giant shows up, or somebody like him, right? But in my days it was Haystack Calhoun, if you remember the wrestlers in those days, and and Bruno Sammartino wrestler. So here's all of a sudden Jacob is alone, and this guy who we have no idea who it is and where this guy even came from starts to wrestle with him. Why, what, when, and where? The Torah gives us no indication. When he perceived that he could not overcome him, when this wrestler saw that he could not beat Jacob, he struck him the socket of his hip. He gave him like a Charlie horse. He whacked him in the side of his hip, dislocating his hip. So Jacob's hip socket was dislocated as he wrestled with him. So now he's in pain. Okay. Then the man, this mysterious wrestler, says to Jacob, "Let me go, for dawn has broken." Now, we don't know why. Why would I let him? What is it? Who cares what time it is? You know what? Obviously, Jacob is still holding on to him, one hand on his hip and the other in a headlock. And the guy says to him, "You got to let me go, for dawn has broken." Okay? So now we have a very curious retort. What does Jacob say to him? "I will not let you go unless you bless me." What? Okay, what's going on here, Dave? I mean, the man is wrestling with him. They're having this fight. He bashes him in his hip socket, and then Jacob won't let him go until this guy blesses him. So he said to him, "What is your name?" So this mysterious person says to Jacob, "What's your name?" He says, "Jacob." He says, "No longer will that be your name as Jacob, but from now on your name will be Israel." Why Israel? For you have striven with the divine and with man and have overcome. You have striven with the Almighty and with man, and you have succeeded. You have overcome. We'll get to that in a moment. And then Jacob inquired. He says, "Divulge, if you please, your name. Now that I have you, I told you mine. And what's your name?" And he says, "What do you need? What do you need to know my name? I'm not telling you my name." And he blessed him there. He blessed him there. This mysterious man blesses Jacob at this particular time. So Jacob called the name of the place Peniel. Why Peniel? Because Peniel, for I have seen the divine face to face, yet my life was spared. So now we're starting to get a little bit of an indication who this person was. He wasn't a regular man. He was, because Jacob says, "I've seen the divine face to face, and yet I've lived." The sun rose for him as he passed Penuel, and he was limping on his hip. He was because a guy gave him this smash, and he smashed his hip in. Therefore, the Torah says, the children of Israel are not to eat the displaced sinew on the hip socket. It's called the Gid Hanasha, this vein on the side of the hip, to this day, because he struck Jacob's hip socket on the displaced sinew. That's the story. Does anyone know what this is talking about? No one. What's happening over here? So first of all, what does it mean for us? That if you go into a restaurant and the guy next to you is ordering a filet mignon, and you go, can you please explain that what to me is? And the waiter says to you, oh, this is the best cut of meat. It's so delicious and tender. And our chef, he makes it like nobody's business. People have come from all over the world to taste. What's your response? I can't eat it because it's the gira nosha. The filet mignon is where this hip thing is. Okay? So you can't eat the hind part of the cow's leg because that's where the hip socket is. And Maimonides, our favorite Ashkenazic philosopher, as we know him, okay, what? I know, so yeah, that's a Sephardic corner. If you notice, they hang out together. Yeah, it's trouble, double trouble over there. So Maimonides writes something very interesting. He writes when he writes about the prohibition about the hip joint, he writes, we do it not because it happened to Jacob, even though the Torah says it happened to Jacob. We do it because Moses forbid it. Okay, it's not because of the story that happened with Jacob. We don't eat that part because Moses made it a mitzvah. It's interesting that he writes that, even though the Torah says that we don't eat it, but that's not the reason why. The reason is because God forbade it. Now, there is a way, I don't know why we're going into this, but there is a way that we can have filet mignon. You want to know how? I'm not telling you. No. You have to, what they call in Yiddish as a word, trebering, the chira. What does that mean? That means delicately, if you take out the vein that runs through the filet mignon, if you take out the vein, it's a very delicate procedure. It's almost like an operation because you can butcher it up, but if you butcher it up, it's nothing. But there are people, and I knew a man that was a specialist in this. He could take it, make a nice clean cut, take out the vein, and you're good to go. So don't be surprised if you go, let's say in Jerusalem, you go to a place called the Red Heifer restaurant, which I've been at, and they have on their menu filet mignon. Means that this process was done. They took out the vein, and you can have the. Leave it up to Jews. Okay, leave it up to Jews.
I'm hungry. Can I find it in Pico Roberts?
You could probably find it in Pico Roberts too, but they're going to charge you. This is not a $3 steak, let me tell you. All right, but let's get back to the story. Okay, so what is enough with the food? Let's get back to the story at hand over here. What's going on over here? Who is this person? So we've kind of narrowed it down that it's not a human being, right? Because a human being doesn't show up in the middle of the night and starts wrestling with Jacob. Because Jacob doesn't refer to him as seeing face to face the Almighty, the divine, and surviving. So who is this? Okay, so we go to the commentary. The commentaries here. I just want to read you one of the commentaries. Okay, and it's going to be very interesting. It's very interesting. So what chapter was that on? 32, verse number. He said like this. So he says again, Vayivasa Yaakov Levadai. So the commentary called the Kli Yoker, is a pretty recent commentary, writes like this, that he stops on the words that Jacob was alone and a man wrestled with him until dawn. He says like this. When it comes to this story, there are many different opinions.
Who is this?
This is a commentary called the Kli Yoker. Okay? There is many different opinions about what this story is about. Because, Shivim Panim La Torah, there's a general rule when we come to interpret the Torah, there are 70 faces to the Torah. Meaning that if we were true like Torah scholars and we wanted, let's say, to publish a commentary ourselves, it would be called the Wednesday JCC Commentary Group. And we published our comments. Now some would be true, some would be not true, but so we have a right as a person to delve into the Torah and give our own opinions of what we think this is. But in order to be able to do that, you have to be knowledgeable in the story and knowledgeable of the Talmud and what the Talmud says about it. So it's not so easy to become a commentator, but he writes as many opinions about this. Some are short, some are long. He says, well, I'm going to give you my own idea. Who is this? This is none other than Esau's guardian angel. So what does it tell you? It tells you that everybody in the world has a guardian angel. Now, what's the difference? some of our guardian angels are healthy and willing to come down and travel. Some of our guardian angels are lazy and they're old and they're decrepit and they don't want to go anywhere and they're retired. So when I was a kid, I went to this very religious school called the yeshiva, Chabad yeshiva, and I still remember that the rabbi was telling us that when we pray, from the words that you pray, you create angels. Okay, you create angels, every word. So if you pronounce the word correctly, you get an angel that's healthy. But if you pronounce the word incorrectly, you get a crippled angel. Now, what's the difference between a healthy angel and a crippled angel? So in Montreal, in the winter, it was very easy to go slip on the ice. So if you were like kind of slipping, the angel that you created in the morning would save you because he's healthy and he could run quickly and catch you. But if you fell on your tuchus, what did that prove? You didn't read correctly. You see how they drill this into your head? Okay? So here, everybody has an angel. So at night, Esav's guardian angel came to protect, came to wrestle with Jacob. Okay? What's his name? He tells you his name. His name is Samael. Samuel. Why? Because his entire essence and his being and his purpose. Now, I know that Marcy's going to love this because this is Kabbalistic in nature. His entire business and purpose, because this doesn't tell you in the story, right? You're not going to find a Samael, but this is Kabbalistic. Is the word Samael means Sama, which is blind. His job in the world is to blind you. Now, he doesn't mean to blind you physically, but his job in the world is to blind you spiritually, meaning that he is a cousin or the same as the Yetzer Hara, the same as the angel of death, the same as Satan. All of these are one family. Now, they could be the same angel, they could be different angels, but they have one purpose here on the earth. And their purpose on earth is to trip you up. To trip you up. Meaning that, you know what? We are been given a destiny, and we've been given marching orders. What are our marching orders? Our marching orders is you're born into this world, and your job here is to make this world the best place possible so God Almighty could feel comfortable coming and living in this world. And that's your job. Okay? How do we do that? By following the 613 commandments if you're Jewish. If you're not Jewish, following the 7 Noahic code. But that's our job. So if we have a straight mind and a clear vision, we know that I'm here to do what? To do the right thing. So when I wake up in the morning, I'm a nice guy, I'm a sympathetic guy, I'm an empathetic person, I care about you, I worry about you, I do the right thing, I brush my teeth, I listen to my mother, I do my homework, okay, and all of these things. Comes along Samael. He's from that cult of blind makers. So him, the evil inclination, the angel of death, Satan, their job, they're not independent. We don't believe like Christianity that the devil is an independent contractor. Everything is by God's will. So God created these guys in order they are the ones that try to trip you up. So when you're walking down the street and someone asks you or someone asks you for a favor or whatever it is, a donation, they're the ones that are going to get into your head. Why, what, when, who, where, they're the ones that are going to blind you from what? From seeing the right path. So here's Samael, here's this angel that's Sarsal Esav. Now, it's interesting that he is the guardian angel of Esav because I remember that in the Torah, there's heroes and there's villains. And not only there's heroes and villains, but there's super villains and superheroes. So Jacob is our superhero, can do nothing wrong. Esav, on the other hand, is the super villain. So it makes perfect sense that Lex Luthor should have a guardian angel like Samael, right? He doesn't get a good normal. You wanted Kabbalah? Here's Kabbalah for you, okay? So here's Esav with this guardian angel who's a bum. Go ahead, Jay.
I have I have grappled. I have wrestled before when I took self-defense.
Yes.
It is impossible if you ever see the face of your opponent. Most of the time you should have your eyes shut so you can feel your weight.
Right.
And wrestling is one thing where you're not. It's not a face-to-face sport at all.
Right, but he saw him when he first encountered him.
Yes.
When he first encountered him. So we'll get to his face in a second. Okay, we're trying to unpack what's going on here. Now, why in the world? Yeah, exactly. Why in the world would Samael show up here why would Samael show up here at night? What is the purpose of this? And why is wrestling going on? So the Kli Yakar continues to say, right? He wants to blind you to make sure that you are blind, in your thought. So, like charity, why? Prayer doesn't help. Being a good guy is only for suckers. It blinds you from thinking correctly, okay? Till you can't see the truth, and God forbid, you turn away from the words of the Torah. That's their job. And he writes that this is the Satan, this is the angel of death, this is the evil inclination, and that's the way it goes. And if you want to really get into Kabbalistic things, if you take the letters of Samael and you switch them around Kabbalistically, the same letters you could say is for the word Einayim. What are Einayim? Eyes. So Samael and Einayim are the same. The eyes are the same because why? Because it's yayin. Because when you, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, from grapes. Anavim, not Einayim. Anavim are grapes. The same word, Samael and grapes. Because what are grapes? When you squeeze them, turns into wine. And when you drink too much wine, what happens to you? You start losing all perspective of what the real is. So that's what this guy does. So this is the angel that has come to wrestle with Jacob. We still don't know why. We still don't know why, but this is who he is. Okay. So now tell me, because now he says you go drunk, and if you're drunk you can't say this, etc., etc., etc. Now why did he come to Jacob? Why would this angel? What is this connection between Jacob and this angel? So he says like this. He says, as long as Jacob was in his father and his mother's house, so everything was okay. This angel, by the way, parenthetically, is also likened to a mosquito. Okay? To a mosquito. You ever seen a mosquito? Yes. Okay? What? A mosquito wakes up in the morning with one thought. What is that? Exactly. He needs blood. Okay? And where is he going to get the blood from? You. Okay? You. Now, anybody here ever go to summer camp? Did you ever go to summer camp? When you go to summer camp, what's the first thing your mother sends with you? Raid. Or in my days, it was some other name where you put it all over your body for one thing, to save you from mosquitoes. Right? And if a mosquito bit you, what did she send along with you? Calamine lotion. Remember that white crap stuff? It smelled, and you put it all over. Okay? So he writes over here that imagine you're a mosquito. Okay? You're a mosquito and you're flying around and you find a person and they make that sound, that buzzing sound, and they find you. Okay? Now, the mosquito, if you're all covered with from head to toe, what can he do? Nothing. What does he look for? He looks for the slight, most minute opening. When he sees that opening, guess what he does? He zooms in. So when you're laying in bed, he's like hovering over you, and he says, where can I go? Well, you're all covered up and this and this. So he can't do anything. But the moment you expose yourself, the moment there's one little opening, zoom, the mosquito zooms in and bites you. Okay. So how does that have any connection here to us? So he says that as long as Jacob was Tomim, as long as Jacob was an earnest person, and he did everything right, and his thoughts were right, and he did all of these things, the mosquito had absolutely no effect on him. Meaning, Samael could not touch him. Nothing. No one could hurt him. Why? Because this is Jacob. This is one of the forefathers. He's an incredible tzaddik. He does everything correctly. Nobody is going to be able to turn his mind. But what happens? Kolzman, this is all true when he was living in his father's house, and all he did was Torah study, and then whatever it is, he listened to his mom. Then he goes to his father-in-law's house, okay? And he begins to work, and what happens to him? He becomes successful. Now he's a rich man. If I were a rich man, right? Remember that story, right? If you become a rich man, what happens to you? All of a sudden you begin to believe in whom? No, not that Jacob did this, don't get me wrong, but now all of a sudden, living in his mother's house, his father took care of all of his expenses, etc., etc. He didn't have to worry about any money. Now he comes to Laban's house, he's got to pay his own expenses. He has 12 kids. You know how much tuition on the Hebrew in a day school is 12 kids? Think about he has to pay tuition, and then you got to pay clothing and this and that. Now he needs money. He needs money, and he starts a business, and he's very successful. Guess what happens? Why did Jacob remain alone on this side of the river? Well, what was he doing on that side of the river? So commentaries write in the Talmud that he went over, he had forgotten pachim ktanim, small little pitchers with like little jugs, insignificant. Why was he going over? Because he felt bad that he was even leaving over on that side of the river for Esav these small insignificant jugs. Meant to say that he already started to worry about his money, and then his values were not, at 150% dedicated. What do I need those jugs for? No. He liked it. He liked having the money, and he was worrying about those little jugs. When the angel of Esav saw that Yaakov Avinu's now, his thought process is not 1,000,000% correct, one slight deviation, guess what happens? Who shows up? The mosquito. The mosquito shows up. So the mosquito thought to himself, now I'm going to be able to get him. Once already I could get him to start thinking about the importance of money and less about the importance of doing the right thing, then I have a chance that I could vanquish him. And that's why he says, he writes over here, that then, when did they fight? Until?
Dawn.
Why was that important why dawn? Because what does dawn do? When the sun comes up, what happens to us? All of a sudden I can see clearly now, right? When dawn comes up, unlike in the night, when everything is confused, you can't see right from wrong, left from right. That's when the sun rises, all of a sudden you can see what? Perfectly well. What you couldn't see 10 minutes ago. When the dawn rose up, which is a euphemism for Jacob's mind, for his mindset. And when it rose up and Jacob said to himself, I came here for these things. What was I even thinking? These are nothing. My whole existence is only for one purpose. And that is to have this ultimate connection with God, as the Talmud refers to them and explain much more in Kabbalah, that these three men, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, were God's chariots. They called them a Merkava, God's chariots, because, it's interesting, they called this new Israeli tank the Merkava. In tank it's called the Merkava. But why were they called God's chariots? Because what does a chariot have? Or I should ask, actually, what does a chariot not have? A will. A chariot only goes where the rider wants it to go. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were considered chariots because their entire lives were dedicated to the purpose of following God's dictum. That's all they were. That's it. So here, Jacob, the sun rises in the morning, and he says to himself, what was I thinking about going for this Bachim Talim? Money means anything. Money is only good because it could do what God wants. To give charity, to buy this, to do this, to share with everybody. Once the sun rose up and Jacob's mindset was now corrected, what happened to the mosquito? Now the mosquito is finished because he can't get into him anymore. Then he says, I got to do something. He cracks his leg. He hits his leg, thinking to himself that this is going to be able to let him go. Because now Jacob's got the upper hand. Jacob has him in a headlock. So even as he tries to whack him in his hip, he doesn't let go, Jacob. And then he says, now that you've come down to challenge me, now I'm going to be victorious. Now I'm going to get something from you. And what is that? A blessing. So not only does he get a blessing from the Almighty, but he forces this angel, which he knows now that it's an angel because during the night, obviously it was revealed to him that this is an angel, and he says to him, bless me. So he blesses him with an incredible blessing. What is the blessing? He changes his name. What? Why was he called Jacob? Because he held on. Yaakov has from the word, Yaakov is from the word Akev, like heel. And that's when he grabbed onto Esau's heel. So he said, no more are you going to be known as the heel anymore. No more. And also, Yakveni means he tricked me. Esau says, last portion, this is the guy that tricked me twice. No more are you going to be known for that. You are now going to have a name called Israel. Israel is now going to be your new name. And because, why? Because Israel means that you contended with the Almighty, not with the divine. I shouldn't say the Almighty. The divine meaning an angel, like you saw an angel, myself, and Esau, and you'll prevail. You will prevail. And that's why we are called the B'nai Israel. Because the name symbolizes to us that we as a people have striven through all types of trials and tribulations. And at the end of the day, what happened to us? We prevailed. We prevailed. So and then he asks him, what is your name? I want to know your name. And he can't give him his name because an angel generally doesn't have a name. It only has a name when it's gone on a specific mission. Like if it's gone to heal Abraham, it's called Raphael. If it's gone to do battle, it's called do this. It's gone to that. So he has no real name. He says, but I got to go because when the sun rises, we know from in Psalms that David tells us that what happens to the angels, they sing praise. So it's time to go daven. I got to go to Shul. So you got to let me go. So therefore he says, I'm not going to let you go till you bless me. And that's where Jacob received the blessings, from Esau's own protector, that the blessings that Isaac gave to him will be fulfilled. Will be fulfilled. And that's the story. So now you know the backstory to this story and all of the small little details. So when you go home today and someone asks you a question, could you explain something to me? I read in the Torah about the epic wrestling match. Who was this guy? Now you'll know what to say to them. All right? Okay. So then what happens? So we're not done yet with the story. Because now he vanquishes the angel. He's feeling, a little better. Now there's some commentaries when he gets healed, whether he gets healed in the morning or whether he's still limping later on. But nonetheless, he still has to have the encounter because his brother is still coming with 400 men. So in the morning he gets up and he sees from a distance Esau is coming. Esau gets off his horse or whatever he's riding, a camel, and Jacob bows himself, and all of a sudden a spirit of mercy, of brotherly love descends upon Esau, and they embrace and they hug and they kiss and they this and they this and Shalom al Yisrael. Okay, there's peace in the family. They've reconciled. And Jacob and Esau says to him, what are these presents? What are these animals? So Jacob tells him, no, they're for you because, I saw you and I just love you so much. I want you to have these animals. And Esau says, nah, I don't need them. Jacob says, yeah, take him. And he took him. And then Esau says, you know what? Why don't I go with you? Where are we going? Let's travel together. And Jacob doesn't think that's such a good idea. Jacob makes up an excuse and he says to him, you know what? Look, the sheep are young and the kids are young and we got a slow pace. You go much faster. Why don't you go ahead? And I'll meet you when I meet you. We had no intention of meeting him. We're meeting him. And then Esau says, the final thing he says is, let me leave you over some of my men to escort you. And then Yaakov says, nah, I don't need him either. Let them go. Now, I always thought to myself, what would have happened if Yaakov and Esau had gone together? What would have happened if Yaakov would have said to Esau, yeah, let's travel together. I'm going home. Why don't we go home? We'll have a nice meal together, with dad and everybody and all of that stuff. And we reconcile. But you know what? This is all speculation. What would have happened? Who knows how history would have changed? Because Esau turns into, whom? Rome. Okay, so his children's children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, they become the Romans, and the Jews were always battling for supremacy, and that's the way it goes. If you remember last week, we mentioned that Isaac said to Esau, your brother will be on top of you until he stumbles. The Jews will be on top until they stumble. What do you mean that when they stumble? When they turn their back to me. So this is what happened during the time of the temple, and they turned their back, and then Esau came on top and destroyed the second temple. You know that. So they split. They go one way. Yaakov goes one way. Esau goes the other way. And throughout our literature, we have this idea that when Mashiach comes, and then we'll go to Har Esav, to Seir, and then we're going to make whatever we're going to do there with Esav, reconcile. But until that time, the two brothers, they will see each other, because at the funeral, when their father dies, they will see each other, because they're going to go both and bury the father together, but they have not much of a relationship. Yaakov is one way, Esav is a different way. One has one set of values, the other one has a different set of values, and that's the way it goes. Okay, that's one story. Now we've got to talk about a different story. Okay, and that is finally when Yaakov then spends about 18 months settled before he goes sees his father. So he's away from Isaac 22 years. I want you to remember this number, because it's going to come into play later in the later classes. He was away from Isaac for 22 years. Why 22 years? Okay, 7 years for Leah, 7 years for Rachel is how much? 6 years for his own business, and then he spent another 18 months, like just relaxing before he went to see his father. So he was away, we counted, for 22 years. I want you to remember that. Then he finally comes to town, and then that's it. That was that. Okay, he buys a field. Now he's in Shechem, and this is the story with Dinah. Now, we already talked about this a little bit on Saturday during my talk. I talked a little bit, but there was one nekuda. There was one point that I want to get into a little bit further detail in here. What happens with Dinah? So Dinah is his one daughter. Remember, he has 12 sons. He's going to end up with 12 sons and one daughter, Dinah. So it says, if you go to chapter 34, which is, you could find on page 181, but we're not going to read this verse for verse. You can read it, but I'm just going to tell the story verbatim from outside. So what happens? So Dinah, who lives in this ultra-masculine environment. I mean, imagine if you have 11 brothers, and then later on she's going to have a 12th brother, with Benjamin. Okay, Benjamin is born, so she has 12 brothers, right? And at this time she only had 11, but when it had 12 brothers, so she lives in this very, very masculine society. Everything is about, males, and, here in America we have what's called toxic masculinity. You can imagine what was going on over there in that house, between 11 brothers. So she doesn't have anybody to talk to about makeup, fashion, anything like that. So she's now with Shem, so she goes out into the marketplace to check out about the girls, what's going on about over the daughters of the land. Shechem, the son of the mayor, we'll call Hamor the mayor of Shechem, Caesar. She's of course beautiful, and he kidnaps her. He kidnaps her and he rapes her. Okay, terrible story. A horrible person. Okay, now he falls in love with her. So he wants to marry her. So him and his father, Hamor, which means what in Hebrew? Hamor, donkey. Right? So, I don't know if that was his real name or the Torah just gave him that name, but his father's name is Donkey. Okay? So him and Hamor go now to Yaakov to ask for the daughter's hand in marriage. Because that's what you do, right? So Yaakov is alone, and 11 brothers are out in the field tending the flock. But the brothers in the field heard what happened to the sister, and they are livid. They are very, very angry, because you don't do this to a girl. Especially to a Jewish girl, you don't take her and rape her and keep her hostage. Okay? So Hamor comes to Yaakov, and he says to Yaakov, my son fell in love with your daughter, and we would love for this would be a beautiful shidduch. My son is very respected in our country, and is beloved in our country as a good guy. Good guy. He's a good guy. And we will, and Hamor says, and then Shechem pipes in himself and says, you know what? Whatever money you put upon me, whatever price she is, I'm willing to pay it, because I know that how great she is, and I am willing to pay any price for me to be able to marry this girl. And besides that, if you let me marry this girl, we can become one people. We'll marry your daughters, you'll marry our daughters, we'll be one happy family here, and you'll do business, and everybody will be happy. Jacob remained silent, but the brothers began to speak. The brothers say like this, look, in general, we're okay with the deal. We're okay with the deal. You seem to be a nice guy, rapist, okay? You're a nice, you're a very, very nice guy, okay? You're a rapist, so, okay? But we can't hold that against you. But there's one problem why we can't pull off this deal. The deal is because we Jews are circumcised and you're not circumcised. So, if you agree that your town and you all go and circumcise yourselves, then we're in. Then you can have our sister, and we'll take your daughters, and you can marry our daughters, and we'll do business and all of that stuff. Jacob doesn't say anything. He listens to this plan of theirs. So it seems that he's okay with it, otherwise he would have protested. Hamor and Shechem are so overwhelmed, especially Shechem is so overwhelmed with the beauty of Dinah, that he agrees. He says, yeah, it's a deal. I'm going to go back to my town and I'm going to tell them. He comes to the town and he says, guys, great news. These Jews that have so much money because they own everything, right? They own the banks, they own insurance companies, they own the radio stations, the TV stations, Hollywood. They own everything, are willing to join hands with our clan, with our city. We could be one big happy family and all of their business could be ours. Their animals, their livestock, their daughters could be ours. Our daughters will be theirs. We're going to have so much business and so much money, you'll never be able to do it. They go, oh, great. There's one small little caveat. What is that? You have to circumcise yourself. Okay, all right, let's do it. So they all agreed and they circumcised. On the third day, when they were all herding, Shimon and Levi, two of the brothers, roll into town. Now I picture this like a Western. I don't know why. They just roll into town, the two of them. Of 11 brothers, these two roll into town with their swords and they kill everybody. They literally kill the whole town of Shechem. Well, no one can stand up against them because they're all hurting. So they kill all of the men. Then once they kill all of the men, they send a message to their brothers who are still in the field, come to town because now we're going to loot it. So all of the other 11 brothers show up and they take everything, the gold, the silver, the diamonds, the clothing, everything, the animals, everything they loot and they bring it back to Jacob. Okay? And they come back with the prize of all prizes, their sister, because the sister was being held hostage. So they kill Shechem, they kill Hamor, they kill the entire town. They come back and Jacob is furious at them. He is, what? The women they took with them. They took the women and the children with them. But the men, they killed all of the men. So they come back to Jacob, and Jacob is furious. He's so angry. He says to them, what have you done there? Now the entire region is going to be against us. You made us nauseous in the eyes of all of the inhabitants here, because you went out there and killed them. What did you kill them for? What did you kill them? Your job was to go and get Dinah back. You go out and kill all of these people? So Shimon and Levi, there are no slouches now, and believe me, you don't want to start with them. Trust me. You don't want to start with Shimon and Levi. Their tempers, they trigger very easily. They said, our daughter, which they meant their sister, is going to be treated like a prostitute. No one is going to be treated like a prostitute. And that's the end of the story. That's the end of the story. And they move on. They leave. Now no one attacks them. No one attacks them. Nothing happens. There's no ramifications of this. But this is the story. That's a very difficult story, in so many different ways, because you don't know who here is the hero. When we talked about this on Shabbos, who's the hero and who's the villain in the story? We know one villain. The villain is Shechem. He's a rapist. So we can all agree that this guy's a villain and he got what he deserved. I have no pity for him. I have no pity for his father. Goodbye. See you later. Dinah is also criticized. Where are you going? You're a Jewish girl. You're supposed to be in school doing your homework. What are you gallivanting in the town, foreign country with this and going to see the girls of the town? So she also gets a little bit of a bad rap. The brothers, Bemirma, deceivers, right? They talk to Shechem and Hamor in a deception way. They don't look that good. And later on, even though that Jacob doesn't, there's no ramification on his deathbed, he still reminds them of that. He still reminds them, Shimon v'Levi achemhem. Shimon and Levi are brothers. Their sword is their is their occupation. I mean, they triggered very. So he still had it in his heart. Many years later, just before he died, he reminded them, of this. So they're not. Jacob, he doesn't say anything in this story. I mean, he doesn't say to Shem the first thing, "Where's my daughter? You want to talk shidduch? Bring me my daughter back first, and then we could talk about shidduchim, about marriage." He doesn't do anything. And then when his sons say, "Hey, we're going to go in there. They don't say going to kill him, but they say come up with this plan of circumcision." He doesn't say anything, so it must be that he acquiesced. He was okay with that plan. So commentators say, why was he okay with the plan? Because he had no clue and no idea they were going to kill everybody. He thought to themselves, one or two things is going to happen. One, they won't agree. The people in town are going to go, what? Are you nuts? Yeah, you're crazy? We're not circumcising ourselves. They want to do business, we could do business, but we're not circumcising ourselves. So the plan would have fallen away and we would have got back Dinah. Number two is, if they would have agreed, you still go in there weak, you go into the house, you take Dinah home. That was Jacob's idea of what was going to happen. In his wildest imagination, he didn't think that Shimon and Levi are going to walk in there with their swords and kill everybody. But you can think about the story any way you want. I want to zero in on one particular aspect that Maimonides and his counterpart Nachmanides jostle about. They jostle. They don't disagree on this point. The idea of the culpability of the people in town towards Shechem's action. Were Shimon and Levi justified in killing these people, or were they not justified in killing these people? That's what I want to zero in just for a few minutes, because we don't have much time. So we're going to start with Nachmanides, which is different than Maimonides. Nachmanides lived in afterwards. Maimonides died in 1204, and Nachmanides lived in the middle of the 13th century, so about 50 years after him. Okay, brilliant. I mean, I'm not going to weigh in who is more brilliant, Nachmanides or Maimonides, because I'm like an ant compared to these giants. But nonetheless, we look at Maimonides as being, Moshe vad Moshe like come Moshe. From Moses to Moses, there was none like Moses. Okay, fine. But Nachmanides is no slouch. Put it this way. In Barcelona, where he lived, there was a guy, Pablo Cristiani. He was a Jewish convert to Christianity. And he wanted to have the whole Jewish community of Barcelona convert to Christianity. So he decided he's going to challenge the Ramban to a debate. We have the whole extent of the debate in a book called The Disputation. The Rambam took him and rattled him to such a point that King John, because they lived under Christianity, Maimonides lived under Islamic rule, Ramban lived under Christian rule. The king, the third day of the debate, called in Nachmanides and told him, you know what, you've destroyed Christianity, you better leave, because they're going to lynch you. So he gave him like a little bit of money, and he ran to Israel. He had to literally leave town. Barcelona he caught a boat to Israel. If you go now in Yerushalayim, there's the Ramban Shul. The Ramban in the 13th century established a shul, but there's no Jews there. This was during the Crusades, so you had to pay people from Hebron, Jews, to come and daven to make a minyan. But the Ramban Shul is still around. It was destroyed, rebuilt, but it's still around. Just to tell you that, so Ramban writes like this. He says, in the name of he calls him the Rav, he calls him the Rabbi. In the name of the Rabbi, who does he mean? Maimonides. Maimonides writes that they had every right to kill these people. Why? Because he writes like this. The Jews are committed to keep 613 commandments. A Gentile only has 7 commandments. It's called the 7 Noahic code. That's what a Gentile has to keep. But if a Gentile doesn't keep any of these 7 Noahic codes, there's a right to kill them. You have a right to just like if a Jew commits murder or if a Jew commits idolatry, the court has a right to kill them, to put them to death. Same thing is true. So Maimonides writes here that since one of the laws is that you have to establish a court system, and the court system has to be just, because these people failed to establish a court system in Shechem, because if they had a real court system, what would have happened? They would have said to Shechem, what are you doing? They would have taken Shechem and they would have judged him and they would have put him to death their own. But they didn't. So since they failed to do this, they were culpable and accessories to a crime, and Shimon and Levi had every right to go in there, just like any Gentile that performs an Avera and doesn't fulfill it. The Jewish court has a right, of course, when the Jewish court has no jurisdiction in these days today, but in the days of, whenever the Jews lived in Israel, when it was a court, you can do that. So Maimonides writes they were completely justified in doing this. No problem, case solved. Okay? Now, Nachmanides says, not so fast. He disagrees with the Rambam, and he says to him like this: yes, I understand what you're saying about the court system, and they have to establish court system, but nowhere do we find in the Torah that Jews have a responsibility of taking matters in their hands. If a Gentile goes out and doesn't fulfill one of the things, who says a Jewish court has a right to do this? We have finding. He brings a proof. He says we have. Sorry, he says we have in history, we know that there's been Gentiles living in Israel, Canaanites, Jebusites, Perizzites, that worshipped idols. Idols is definitely one of the 7 Noahic codes, and we don't see that the Jewish courts went out and killed them all. We put them to death. So who says that a Jew, even if you agree that Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach have a death sentence against them, who says that a Jewish court has a right to implement this? We don't see anywhere in history that a Jewish court. So in his opinion, Shimon and Levi didn't have a right, and that's why Yaakov got angry. He said, if they had a right according to Jewish law, why did Yaakov get angry at them? On the contrary, they performed the mitzvah. They killed them all. So he says, no. Yaakov agreed with me, Nachmanides says, that they had no right to kill them, and that's why he was critical of them. And they shouldn't have done it this way. They did it this way. I understand why they did it this way. Why? Because it's much easier to kill people when they're hurting than when they're not hurting. And so when you can trick him, to me this was a modern day Mossad thing, because it's much easier blowing up beepers than it is fighting face to face. So if you can blow up 3,000 beeper and knock out Hezbollah that way, Baruch Hashem. If you could put it in their answering phones, Baruch Hashem. You know what? It's like it's a good thing to do that. So that was the argument between the two. Who is going to be right when you meet them in Mitzvah Hashem, when Mashiach comes and Maimonides and Nachmanides will be back, back here, or if you go up to Shemayim, not soon, in your right time, when you go up to Shemayim and you'll go and you'll see Maimonides and Nachmanides, you'll ask them who won the argument. But be prepared for a long sermon. Okay, be prepared for a long sermon, because neither of them were slouches, as I mentioned before. We all know what Maimonides did, and if you're a Talmud of Yeshiva, you know that you cannot study the Talmud without the commentary of Ramban. I mean, these two, that was the idiot Pablo Cristiani. You know what? I tell you, in a fight, the main thing to know is who your opponent is. Okay? If you know your opponent and can get into their heads and understand them, so you have a chance. But if you're going to pick one of the 10 most greatest scholars in the history of Judaism, which is Nachmanides, and you're going to challenge him to a debate on religion, you might as well challenge Mike Tyson to a fight. Not today. 30 years ago, you walked into the ring with Mike Tyson, if you know who he is, the boxer. The challenger already knew before round 1 he lost. Why? Because he pitched in his trunks. And when you pitch in your trunks before the fight, there's a good chance you're not going to win the fight, because he was so ferocious and could knock you out so strong. So that was the fight between Lahavdil, I'm saying. I don't want to compare Mike Tyson to the Ramban. Ramban knew much more Talmud than Mike Tyson. Much more, Mike Tyson. But that's what it was. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the end of Vayishlach. The next couple of weeks we're going to be off. We'll be back on the 8th, and we'll pick it up, hopefully, with the story of Joseph and his brothers. If you think now that Jacob is going to have it on easy street, ladies and gentlemen, let me just tell you, it's not going to be so easy. But we'll have to wait till then. Wish everybody a happy Hanukkah, and have a wonderful day. Whoa.